I want to thank you all for joining us here today. Welcome to episode 1 of the CMO Scoop. So I'm going to be your host, Lara August. I'm the CEO of Robot Creative, and we have worked with thousands of what we call very large small businesses. So we write marketing plans and provide marketing leadership on a part-time basis. And we call these part-time professionals fractional CMOs, which stands for a Chief Marketing Officer. We have a growing network of CMOs that we place with our clients, and each one of them brings their unique background to the table. And I wanted to take advantage of that. So we decided to start the CMO Scoop, and every month we'll be having a conversation with one of those CMOs. And we're going to cover topics and recurring themes that we see in the businesses that we work with. So today, my guest is Lana Harris. She's my business partner here in Robot, and she is the head CMO at Robot. So I thought it made sense to have her kick things off. And today, we're going to talk about building a marketing team. And this is meant to be just a super casual conversation. Lana and I have these conversations all day, every day. And we have the best conversations with our CMOs about what we see happening. So excited to have you all here today. Just to let everybody know that's recently joined, please let us know where you're from in the chat. And if you have any technical issues, please feel free to chat and message Tangela or Zari or just the group, and we'll try to help you troubleshoot anything. And if you have questions, you should have a QA function. So please feel free to drop any questions that you have as we go along in the QA, and we'll get to those kind of maybe at the end, maybe as we go along. We're kind of playing it by ear, casual today. So Lana, thank you for agreeing to be the first guinea pig on this program. And since we're talking about marketing teams, give them a little bit of a taste of your background in building marketing teams.
Sure. So I've been a manager and managing a marketing team or small team for about 15, maybe 20 years now. I have had agency experience. I've worked in media and publishing and worked on a client side and built teams in all of those environments.
And if you had to ballpark and guess, how many resumes have you reviewed in your life?
Oh my gosh. I think we're probably nearing the 1,000 range at this point, if not more.
Yeah, I think it's probably in the thousands. And roughly how many people do you think you've hired internally or for clients, a combination?
Sure. Yeah. So it's probably been, at least in about 100 categories. So like a lot of team members, maybe a couple of hundred.
So I think this is a great conversation because Lana and I are, Robot has been going strong for 28 years now, and we've done a lot of hiring internally for ourselves and for our clients. And obviously, Lana has been a really huge part of that, working with our clients. We've hired for all different kinds of positions, both at Robot and for our clients. Do you want to kind of give a broad overview of the types of positions we've hired for?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the easy low-hanging fruit ones, digital marketing people, copywriters, designers, programmers, account managers, customer service reps, salespeople. There's been a lot, even administrative roles as well.
And when we work with a client to help them fill some of these positions, talk about kind of how we approach that.
So it's really about the function that you want that position or that team to fill. And so we look at the activities that need to happen and really try and group them into roles that we can hire for. Not all tasks and roles really fit well together in one actual human being. So it's about grouping those in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, we sometimes clients are looking for one person, and we call them either like unicorns or flying mermaids. We have a whole bunch of funny words that we use to describe these like mythical beasts that are just really hard to find. They're out there. You can occasionally find them, but I would say they're incredibly rare. So Our team is a little bit different because we have a team of 16 and we have specialization in each of those areas. And that's not what our client teams look like. Again, the type of business we work with is a very, very large small business. And that could be anywhere from like 5 million in revenue to 50 million in revenue. So even at the larger size of some of these businesses, Lana, if you could just paint a picture, because I think a lot of people on the call are going to be able to relate to this. Like, what does a typical internal marketing situation look like for this type of business?
Yeah, it is a situation. So typically you have a person, maybe a small team, 2 or 3 people, and it is most often in an internal situation, it's vertically aligned. So you have like a coordinator and then a manager, or a director and a coordinator, or a director and a manager. But the team is expected to do all the things. And so it's like not in our situation where you have the specialization. It's more vertically aligned and everybody needs to kind of know everything. It's not super ideal if you're trying to be strategic about what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And now the situation that you've just described is, 1 to 3 employees. Like, of 80% of the clients that we work with, they're on the lower end of that, right? Like one marketing employee, or maybe even no marketing employees.
Yes, there's a lot of those.
There's a lot. And I think that that's something that it took a lot of years of experience for me to kind of recognize this pattern, that we have these very, very large small businesses. They have very, very tiny or even non-existent internal marketing teams. And so we thought it would be really relevant to talk about building a marketing team, because we're definitely advocating for it. We're not thinking, that the ideal scenario is just to outsource everything. Like, we're thinking the ideal scenario is that, like, it's kind of weird that we have these really large businesses and they don't have an internal marketing competency. So we talk a lot about what should that hiring look like? Who should that first hire be? And so we wanted to bring a little bit into that into the conversation today. But the reason, and I'm not sure that we can get to the root cause of all of them because it's a variety of different businesses, but what are some of the challenges that you see in businesses of this size that might lead to there not really being an internal marketing team?
I think some of the root causes are definitely the just really trying to find somebody that can like just jump in and do everything. Budget is always a concern. So they want to hire a coordinator, but they want them to be at honestly a CMO level, to be the strategy driver and the executioner. And that's really, really rare that you can get that in one person and have it done well. They also have a variety of things that need to be done, like I kind of referenced before, where it's like, well, you want a web developer to make the technical changes on your website, but then you want someone to go out and do social media and party planning and event coordination. And those just really aren't the same people typically. So a lot of times there's just a failure in believing in the competency, like trial and error of initial hires, and a lot of disappointment because I think the expectations are just off on what you can really accomplish with a single hire, and then what the strategy is on building the team.
Yeah. So I think that definitely the question of budget comes up. Is, as a small business is growing and you're trying to, figure out, there's sales-driven businesses, there's ad-driven businesses, there's a lot of ways, there's brand-driven businesses and location-driven businesses. Some, especially older businesses, have gotten really large despite not having a marketing team. And then the thought of needing to put somebody in-house and to make that first hire can be a little bit challenging. And so back to something that you said earlier, we like to look at what it is that you need as a company, and to really identify what those first tasks are going to be that you're trying to accomplish before you make that first hire. And Lana and I have talked a lot about how sometimes that marketing leadership, to even know what those first things are, is the challenge. So if you could tell me, like, what does marketing leadership and planning look like in a typical small business?
A lot of times the way it is right now, it's very sales driven initiatives and decision making. So it's really good to have a strong alignment with the sales team, but when you're looking at new hires, it's a lot of times sales support activities that are prioritized and not really strategic marketing competencies to really help build a program that can be a referral source for leads and the sales team, especially if it has been very much a successful business historically on sales and relationship. They just don't even know how to start building a program that is scalable.
Yeah, we see this a lot for sure in like B2B businesses where you'll sometimes see that combined title of sales and marketing director. And that's not always, but it's usually somewhat of a misnomer because that person is usually coming from a sales background. They've grown up within the sales ranks. They rarely have had a marketing background in the way that we would consider it. If Lana, if you want to dig into a little bit, like what a sales background might look like versus when we use the word marketing, because salespeople use the word marketing a lot, but how they use the word marketing and how we use word marketing.
Yeah. So from a sales background, you're doing a lot of lead generation and qualification. So you're really focused in on the sales funnel alone. You're bringing leads in and you're doing marketing activities, which may be demos and follow-ups and, setting appointments, and then you're trying to close the deal. And that's, when a sales leader wants to add a marketing component, it's usually to help fix or strengthen one of those areas in the funnel. When we look at a marketing component, we're looking at what happens prior to leads coming into the sales funnel. What is the awareness and consideration phases? What is the community and brand building activities? And then after the sale, what is the onboarding? What is the advocacy? What is the customer relationship that happens after the sale? What are your recruitment goals? And how do you fit that in line with who you are as a company, what your mission and your vision and your values are? So marketing for us is a much bigger picture than typically what a sales leader defines as marketing when they're looking to hire.
Yeah, we actually sometimes have people apply for jobs here that we have internally that we'll list as marketing positions, and they'll be coming from a pure sales background in the way that we use the word, right? Mm-hmm. Recognizing that these are all valid terminologies in different environments. You use words differently. So they're applying for roles with us. And a lot of times they've had one of these pure sales backgrounds. So when we dig in, and they'll make it all the way to the interview sometimes because they're saying all the right things. They've had great performance. They've managed people, but they get, all the way into the interview. And then we start asking about, their experience in digital marketing, and they've never opened one of the platforms. They don't, know how to set up a platform, train someone on a platform, what's involved in maintaining or using a platform. And so we just can see some of the struggles. They're incredible sales leaders, but they just may not have that more technical. A lot of marketing
hands-on, yeah,
very hands-on. Yeah, it's very technical. There's a lot of applications, and just to underscore that a little bit, I don't mind revealing the fact that we struggle sometimes to hire and train, right, Lana? If we could talk about like some of the challenges of just staying on top, even with specialists and individual roles.
I think marketing is one of those roles that is evolving so fast that you almost can't keep up with the technology side. So when, not to date or age myself, but when I started in marketing and PR, there was a lot of print and TV and radio. There's like 3 things that you could do. And then you're like, oh, and then experiential. There's stuff that you went out and did. And in today's environment, it's all about the digital experience, and you may still have some of those other things and you still have to be great at them, but you also have to know how to do email workflows and direct response workflows. You also have to know how to advertise and message in social media platforms, and each platform is different. And you also have to be able to work in every CRM. And now that, with all of the tools like integrating, you have to know how to connect them all, and you have to be able to have analytics and your website tracking all of the things. And it's very technical, which I think is great because everyone wants to know what's happening with their data. But it does take constant learning, which is why learner mentality is a core value at Robot. We have to have people that work for us that don't mind getting up every day and knowing I got to go learn something, even though I learned it last month, I got to relearn it because Google changed something or Meta changed their algorithm or whatever the case may be. It is a constant learning environment for a modern marketer.
And that's honestly probably great advice for any of our businesses to understand, our kind of audience to understand as well, is that learner mentality is a great thing to look for when you're hiring someone, because if you're a small business, what are the odds that you have a real formal training program, right? Like having people who you screen during the interview process, and we'll come back to hiring and onboarding in a minute, but having people that you screen for the quality of being a continual learner can really help with that, just to find people who want to stay on top of it, who are always pushing themselves, so that you as a manager don't have to, be completely on top of that, because there's so many things. So a lot of our conversation regarding sales and marketing leadership is more B2B businesses. And we work with B2B businesses and B2C businesses. So in B2B, oftentimes we're seeing that it's a sales-driven team. You probably have leadership in the form of the sales and marketing leader. But talk more about like the type of employee or employees that you usually see in like a B2C business that's a small business.
Sure. So a lot of our experience with B2C businesses are brick and mortar type businesses. They have retail storefronts or restaurants or bars or things like that. And so a marketing role in those types of organization is typically like the box support system. So it's somebody who is supporting one or more of those retail locations, POP, promotions, training, a lot of training and rollouts with the on-site staff happens within a marketing role. And it's very on the fly, just whatever is needed. That person they do a lot of running around.
Like we need a sign, or we need a table tent, or yes. And social media. I don't know if you mentioned, but like they're almost always responsible for the social media account as well.
Absolutely. Loyalty programs, things like that, stuff that is very closely aligned to, what's happening in that location.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are differences between B2B and B2C that we see in terms of how these organizations are evolving, but the marketing teams are, very small within both of them, or, again, sometimes even non-existent. And I think some of the challenges that we talk about regularly are that, making that first hire, how do you know who you're hiring for if you're lacking the marketing leadership at the top, right? You mentioned in one of your earliest statements that a lot of times we see first hires that are expected to do the social media, make the signs and lead the entire strategy. But to us, leadership probably looks a little bit different. And so let's talk about what an ideal leadership situation would look like in a business of this size, and then whether that's realistic or not.
Sure. I mean, I think it really starts at the top. I think you need to have an actual marketing expert who's leading that division. And it is not just a sales support function. Typically, it needs to be a bigger and support the entire organization. So you're looking at someone that ideally has, 15 to 25 years of experience in actual marketing and marketing leadership, who's built strategies, who's run departments, who's run programs. It really has that hands-on and leadership experience. From there, then they need to have like some amount of specialization. You aren't going to find very many quality candidates. It's kind of like the jack of all trades, master of none scenario. You can find somebody who will take all of the things on, but that doesn't mean you're going to get them executed at the same level of quality that you might need. So it's really about then deciding what the different divisions of labor are going to be. And some of them can be hired in at a very entry level coordinator type position, but some things you want somebody to come in with a little bit more experience. If you have someone running your advertising or managing your client list, those are really important. One, it's related to budget, and two, it's related to your most valuable resource, which is your client list. And so you want somebody that has some actual experience successfully running these programs. So you don't want to hire the kids in for some of these roles, because you really want to actually make some progress and let everyone, roll up and learn more. But you can't start with interns and expect to get, top experience.
Yeah. And so the challenge, I think, as a small business is hiring like a full-time CMO is, it's 6 digits plus. And then many times if you get someone that's incredibly experienced and has been through several different organizations and managed teams and kind of seen it all, they oftentimes don't do a lot of the technical work hands-on. They've already been there, done that. They've excelled beyond it. And so that's why our advice, obviously we staff fractional CMOs, and this is not to be a commercial for all of that. I think that that's a great solution, but some of the other things we tell people are, you can get advisory positions, right? So this is really common. You see it in startups, in the startup world, more than in the established business world, where they'll give a percentage of equity to somebody that's in a marketing role or an advisory position, just for a number of years to help get it off the ground. You can sometimes find that it's just rare in an established business, but I would even say peer groups, mentors, you can hire consultants, finding if you don't have a marketing background that includes actually managing those programs and operating them and hands-on doing this type of work. You may have a marketing degree. We actually have lots of business owners that have marketing degrees, but then they went on to specialize in a specific industry and not in a marketing role. And so, looking for somebody that has that kind of detailed marketing experience, even at any quantity, of hours, I think is really important. And they can help guide you in developing a plan and figuring out who that first hire is going to be, the types of things they need to be able to execute. And they should have the background to really, interview them well and understand what they need. So, I think we're big advocates of getting some form of leadership first so that you can really clearly define those positions. And so, Lana, if we could talk for just a little bit about what does that first marketing hire look like? What type of person you've kind of touched on. It could be a leader, it could be a manager. Another opportunity is to kind of outsource it. If you kind of talk about the pros and cons of those different opportunities.
Sure. So definitely hiring a CMO, you're going to get mostly the strategy for it, and I think that's going to be really great. But like you mentioned, they're typically not the ones that are digging in on the day-to-day stuff. With a kind of a director or a manager level, you will typically get some hands-on work, but they can also help build or help execute on a marketing plan, and even just overseeing the day-to-day of what's going on. And so a manager to a director, that's really just levels of experience. How many years of experience do they have? I think the pros and cons is the lower the level you go, the more affordable, it's going to be for your budget. And a lot of times when we're talking about these businesses, when they're building it for the first time, there isn't even a budget to be had. So you're kind of stealing and borrowing from other departments to just build the budget to begin with. So it definitely is more budget friendly to start on the lower end. And if you have, somebody within the organization that has some of this experience, a board member, a peer, a role model, someone that can help just at a very small fraction, help evaluate and determine what the plan is going to be and what you actually need, you can start a little bit lower on the experience because you can be more directive. I think the best way to do that is to really spend a little bit of time on the front end, mapping it out, understanding what your programs are going to be and how that maps to people, but also what are your KPIs? Like once you get these people onboarded and trained, don't forget about the training, because they may know certain skill sets, but they don't know your organization. And there's some learning that happens there. You have to know how you're going to evaluate them and how you're going to evaluate the program so you know whether or not you're making any progress. So it really is important, even if the leadership side isn't full-time or isn't permanent, that you start there for the planning part so that you can then be more confident in what you're hiring for and who you're hiring.
Absolutely. And we joke all the time about how there's some confusion about what the title marketing manager means. Are they managers in the classical sense? Like
they're managing programs. You've got a coordinator or a manager are typically managing and working on programs and their field, their area of duties. A director is typically managing people and helping to execute the plan. And then your CMO is the one who's driving the strategy with the leadership team, and then overseeing that all of the activities get done.
Yeah. And I think this is a subtle title difference, but really important because we both have been doing this a long time. And I feel like when we were entry level and when people were first starting out, 20 years ago, the titles were things like associate or coordinator. And I feel like everyone's a manager now. Like it feels like almost every entry level position now comes with that title. And then sometimes our clients get confused. Or companies that we're working with thinking, they really are not self-managing. They are definitely not managing anyone else, but they usually are capable of managing their discipline or their program. They've, with a few years of experience, you can get really good at email marketing or social media or event planning, like one of these different categories. But that can be a little confusing. So, so you talked about, finding the right person. And I thought there might be some interview tips, inside secrets we could share in terms of how we evaluate candidates on the front end to try to find those really good candidates. And so could you talk just a little bit about like the way we test and the way we evaluate in the interview process?
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely makes the hiring process easier to kind of like wade through as we're going through lots and lots of resumes. But I think it's kind of a two to three part. We do definitely pre-screen with some specific questions so that if, when we're asking about years of experience, how many years of experience do you have in the following areas? Just let them self-evaluate because it gives you a starting point when you have a conversation with a candidate.
Lana, outline what some of those things are, because it's easy to say years of experience and they're already going to have like the number of years they've been at a position, but the position may have a broad description. And so when we say years of experience in the pre-screen, we're breaking it down.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So when we write a job description, we kind of know, this is a candidate who in this role, we want to hire someone who can manage the social media, do the email marketing, do this. Like we have this specific tasks, like we think through the daily, weekly, and monthly tasks, and we write all that out. So when we ask the pre-screen questions, it's for each one of those tasks, we're asking the candidates to self-evaluate how much experience they have in each of those areas. And I think it's not like a set an automatic rule and rule out anybody who doesn't meet 100% for each one of those. It's a way for you to gauge that individual candidate and compare it to other candidates, because you can get somebody who's very dynamic in an interview scenario, but they don't actually have hands-on experience doing the three things you really need them to do. So it's a kind of a check and balance. You can evaluate who they've got more of this or more of that. It helps you understand what type of training and iterations they might need to get up to full speed if they're low in a certain area. So it's definitely part of the learning experience. We interview the candidates that meet minimum criteria. And for anyone that we like, that we think is, fits, seems like they're going to fit culturally, they say the right words, right? Like they all know the right words to say. And then it comes down to the testing, like you alluded to. And so we do an inbox testing. They're invited to partake in if they want to move on to the next level of the interview process. And so we give them a stack of papers that have little bits of things that they might be doing on a daily basis. So if it's a marketing position, it might be writing social media copy. It might be evaluating the results of a marketing campaign. It might be, several different things. And so we put, 5 or 6 things in there, maybe 7 or 8, and we don't give them too much explanation. It's like, we just want to see what you can do. We'd like to get some feedback just to see how you work. We give them an hour time block to get it done. And then that's it. There's like, come in, get it done, and then turn it in. And so it really gives us good insight into like, what do they complete? What do they not complete? What did they get right in our opinion?
What did they choose to do or not do? Like,
right. Where did they start? Where did they end? If they didn't finish something, which one did they leave out? And you obviously get how quick they are. And how well they can manage to a time deadline. Deadlines are important for any job, anywhere. So,
especially in marketing.
Yeah. So whether or not they complete it at all, is really important, to be able to evaluate. People can talk about their, time management skills all day long, and they know, again, all the right words to say, but this inbox testing really gives you the ability to evaluate whether or not they've really got the skills to do it.
Yeah. And I heard about this inbox testing. It's been at least a decade that we've been using this. We had other forms of tests before that were very specific to a role, but I was kind of researching ways to test. And I found that in Europe, they were doing this to test administrative professionals, where it's literally like an inbox where there'd be a stack of stuff and they're expected to like come in and start working through all of it. And I do think it's so telling to see what they gravitate to first, what they don't get through, especially if they're applying to be a writer and they leave the writing for last, or they don't do the writing or don't get through it. And it's like, there shouldn't be any writer's block if that's the position, or, if they're expected to do advertising and they leave out or don't do well on the component where we're asking them to just really simply evaluate some of the results that come back from an ad campaign. So definitely a proponent of this form of testing. I think it's been invaluable. And you said a couple of different times, they have all the right words. When we were applying for our first jobs, the internet didn't really exist. And so we didn't have access to all the amazing training and tools and resources that I'm going to say the young adults these days do. They are incredibly sharp, incredibly polished. The resumes have all the right words. They now can run them through ChatGPT and have them written almost perfectly to make it through any electronic scanning process. Not that most small businesses are using that, but it's become more and more challenging because we get hundreds and hundreds of resumes for any role and they'll all look great.
Yeah.
It makes it really hard to filter them. So I think writing these really detailed pre-screens, and just to break it down a little bit more, because a lot of times the title is marketing manager or digital marketing manager. And so we'll say, tell us the number of years of experience that you have in each of these specific areas. And it'll be like email marketing. It'll be not just social media. That's very broad.
Yeah.
Facebook or Meta specifically, X, LinkedIn. Like there's a lot of people that have used TikTok personally, but they've never used LinkedIn professionally. And those are two really different things. So,
and yeah, even the advertising, a lot of people have done, especially personally, social media, but they've never gotten into an ads manager. They don't know how to build an audience. They don't even know how to optimize an ad campaign. So all of those things are really important to like suss out separately.
Yeah. Or sometimes they'll say they do social media advertising, but the only thing they've ever done is click on the boost button.
Yes.
That is not what we're shooting for at this level. Right. So I think if small businesses could implement a little bit of these screening processes on the front end, have some leadership or help to figure out like exactly what you're looking for, what the business is trying to accomplish, to write a really good job description, and then apply some of this screening on the front end and even go so far as testing. Now, I think you said it made it easier, but I think it actually takes a hell of a lot longer, right?
Oh, it takes a lot of time. I mean, I think it helps clarify the selection process. Maybe that's what I should have said.
Yeah,
But
definitely not easier.
it is not a quicker, faster, easier process to go through, but I think it's a better one for sure.
Yeah. And in all the years we've been hiring too, it's so different. When I first started hiring, you could be evaluating resumes, let them come in for a couple of weeks, and then you could review all of them, and then you could have them do the testing the following week, and maybe it would take a couple of weeks to get through all the testing, and then go into like final interviews. And things move much faster now. Like the really good candidates aren't waiting that long. They get snatched up.
Yeah, you almost have to, it's almost like speed dating. You have to like move really fast and make some quick decisions. And I wish we had more time and could do the slower process, because I think we always used to say like hire slow, fire fast. If you can take your time on making that hire, you're gonna have less fires at the end, or it's just not gonna not work out as much. But I think you have a lot of trial and error when you have to move that fast. But if you want a chance of getting any of the top candidates, I mean, it's just the world we live in these days. You just have to move faster.
Yeah. Now, one thing that can help, I think, is if you have a really strong company brand, if you're a company that is, I hate to say it, but cool, or that looks like a great place to work. If you really display your culture through your brand, or have some way that candidates can scope out the internal culture, whether it's through your social media or through hiring sections on your website, that could help with people being more motivated or more excited about joining your company. They might hang out in that process a little bit longer. You may have people that are, apply multiple times, that are excited to work for your company. So I think there are things that you can do in that challenging market just to build your own company brand. But it's gotten to be a lot more difficult. So once we, get them through this screening process and we get the new hires onboarded, you started to mention, what you do every day, what you do every week. Could you talk a little bit about your recommendations for trial periods or training periods at the beginning of your?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important to, just as a general rule, keep in mind that when somebody new comes on board, you can't just say, and here's what you do, and do it all from day one. There does have to be a little bit of an onboarding period. So what we try and do is really map out a 30, 60, 90 plan. And it's like a probationary period, but it helps the candidate and the manager understand what we're going to accomplish in the first 30 days. And then what are we going to build upon that for the next 60 days? And then what, final activities do we need to train on in that 90 days? And theoretically, once you've hit 90 days, they should be able to start self-serving themselves and keep moving things forward. I mean, depending on how complicated or complex a role is, it could take longer. For some of our roles, have told people like, hey, you're going to feel like you're drinking from the fire hose for about 9 months. But if you can just stick with the learning process and the iterations, you'll be amazing. You'll be like running this place by the time you hit that 9 months. So it does take a little while, but I think really mapping that out can help with the retention. Because once you put all this time and energy into a candidate, it sure feels awful when in month 4 to 6, they're like, you know what, this just isn't for me. Yeah. And then you have to start the process all over again. So we even go so far as to say, okay, well, what is the first week going to look like? What is the first month going to look like? And get super detailed. I think over checking in with a new candidate is very important. So we always have managers do daily check-ins for a few weeks, and then a weekly check-in for a few months. And then they get moved into the normal like team meeting and one-on-ones process after that. But I just think, to really help support a new candidate, especially if you don't have a formal training process, they need a lot of support, they need a lot of hand holding, and they need a lot of one-on-one time to make sure that they don't feel like they're just being thrown into the deep end without a life preserver.
That's a good way to put it, because it can be challenging. So if you have somebody that's a coordinator level, you'd expect that they're going to need help with basic skills and feedback, and a lot more feedback. Somebody that's more high level may not need as much of that. You might expect that they can come in and hit the ground running and build some of these programs with less guidance. But I think knowing where those people really are on the spectrum and sussing that out during the interview process to say, have you built programs before, or have you run things under someone else's leadership, can be really good clarifying questions to ask, just so that you can manage your own expectations correctly, to say like, okay, I expect this person says they've built these programs 3 times. They should be able to come in and build one for me. Or, well, I reported to someone and there was a team of us working on it. And, I've done this once for a couple of years. Like, they may not be able to come in and spin up a whole program for you, just for example.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good point that I think you're making is these 30, 60, 90 plans, or however you evaluate your onboarding, is not just role specific, it's candidate specific. So when you've chosen a candidate, you really need to go back and look at where their core competencies are and where they're maybe a little less experienced, but they've got the building blocks, and where they don't have any experience in something. You are not going to find a candidate that's at 100% at each one of the things that you want to do. Very likely. So if you can build that 30, 60, 90 to really tailor to the areas that they're going to need more support, and then not hamstring them by like all the check-ins for things that they can take over, I think it's going to be a better experience for both the manager and the candidate.
Absolutely. And just to go a little bit deeper, even into the 30, 60, 90, because the concept of daily, weekly, monthly, I think is really important. I always refer to it as like the frequency principle in training, is that things that a candidate or a new hire does every single day, you'd expect that after a few days, they'd be pretty good at it, right? If it's the watch a couple times, do it a couple times, it doesn't take more than a couple of weeks, and you should be a near expert at something that you're doing daily. If it's something that you only do weekly, like, that changes the timeline. So it might be several weeks before you've really had the opportunity to even watch or dig in and to start to take over on some of these activities. When you switch to monthly, the time in between those experiences also leads to a loss in the understanding and following of the processes. So things that are happening monthly, and the hardest, of course, are like the quarterly or annual, like people expecting to do campaigns on a quarterly basis, or something that happens annually, if they haven't worked any one place for a number of years, they've never seen a full annual cycle. So I think that can be just really important when you're building the 30, 60, 90-day programs, to say, like, at the end of 30 days, you should be pretty good on all of the daily stuff, and you should have experienced the weekly, but maybe not be great at it. By the end of 60 days, for all the weekly stuff, you should be rocking on it. You should be great. And then by the end of 90 days, you should have seen all of the monthly, and you should be starting on that, but you may still not be an expert because it's probably only been 3 times. So yeah,
I think it also, I was just going to add to that is, the daily tasks, the weekly tasks, you're going to be able to do that very easily with like hands-on, on the job training. Those things that are quarterly and annually or semi-annually, if they're complex activities, building campaigns, or, putting together marketing recaps, or, whatever the process is, that may be more of an area where you need to have more documentation of a process to really help that person along. Because even if they've done it a time or two, but they're only doing it once or twice a year, every single time you're going to be like, now, what was the third thing I was supposed to do? So it's really helpful, I think, if you think about, again, nobody, I think, has a full-on documented training program, but think about the things that are going to be hardest to remember and retain if they're done infrequently, and, jot down at least a bulleted point list of steps.
Yeah, and so this is the starting point. And I just have one more question before we go to questions from our audience. So audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. We're going to get to those shortly, but So you've hired somebody, you've onboarded them, they've met these basic expectations, they've been there a year or two, and they're rocking and rolling. So if they stick around, what does advancement look like? What do we typically see? Who's going to be providing that ongoing management? Just curious what your thoughts are on management.
So I think they're definitely in an internal team, there is advancement opportunities, but because it is a small team, there's not usually like big giant jumps. It's really more you're getting better and like going from, a level 1 to a level 2, and really honing your skills. I think that sometimes you can have people that are like, well, when do I get to be the director? And it's really, well, if you haven't done all the things and you don't have the experience to run an entire department, just because you've been a social media manager for 3 years does not mean that you now qualify for that higher level job. So advancement internally can sometimes looks like getting deeper into what you're already doing, and so you become more of a subject matter expert, or you have to be the person willing to and has capacity and capabilities to move from job to job or function to function to gain wider experience if you eventually want to move up.
Yeah, we see a lot of marketing directors who have been there a long time. They have all the institutional knowledge. They're incredibly loyal to the companies, but they may not have ever had a leadership role in another company. They may have only managed the internal team. And so we see them struggle a little bit compared to peers that might have had a couple of different leadership roles at different companies. There's just great experience that comes with that. Of course, as a small business owner, it's horrible to see these people that you've invested so much energy in to leave and go get that experience. So if you have really incredible hires that you want to hold on to, I think giving them access to training and leadership opportunities, community board engagement, being on the marketing committee of a local community organization is a great way to gain some invaluable marketing experience and give back to the community at the same time. But I think, giving those people that you want to advance and excel room and space and access to those kinds of opportunities is really important. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was like, and peer groups, if there's an opportunity for them to have a peer group or a mentorship, even better, with somebody else either in the organization or external to the organization, that can really be invaluable and give them the learning that they need to help your organization and continue to provide value.
Absolutely. So now, thank you all for your patience as we're having our conversation like we do every day, and we could go on for hours, but I want to get to some of the questions. So Tangela, if you wouldn't mind serving up a couple of the questions, if we have some in the QA.
So we've got a question, and it says, I am a content creator slash cinematographer. How do I get into a marketing team? What all areas do I focus on to improve so that I can get into the advertising business?
Well, I mean, that's a handful of a question. So I would say there's based on that, I think the easiest way to start is by joining some of these associations where you will be exposed to more people in that field. So that you can network and find out what people are looking for. I think that type of firsthand research to find out what people in your market are typically doing, like if you've got specific skill set in videography, what are the complementary activities? Do you have editing skills? Do you have still photography skills? What are people who are doing videography also doing in their roles? Like really do role research, and that might give you an idea as to what other skill sets you might need to add. And then in terms of actually getting that job, a lot of people most hiring managers want people that have actual experience. So if you don't have experience in all of these areas, looking for internships and volunteer opportunities where you can practice those skills for the first time and have stuff that you can eventually put on your resume.
Yeah, so a portfolio. I think for this type of role, also having a select portfolio that has examples of the types of work. And so it's real different if you're going to work for an agency or a service provider that offers these services versus going to work for a company that has an internal marketing position. If it's a company with an internal marketing position, making sure that your portfolio has things that are relevant to them. If it's for an agency, finding out what types of work the agency does, and then providing a variety of different samples, I think is really important, but not too big of a portfolio either. You want to really put your best work forward. But like Lana said, sometimes that's volunteering. Sometimes it's something that you do for your church, or it's something that you do for your neighbor, or, it's even something that you do just for fun, and being really transparent as you're interviewing, like the work that you've put in to try to build this portfolio and your desire to be in the industry, I think is really important.
Well, I'll ask Lara, what do you think? Do you have any recommendations for different types of organizations young people can join? I guess generally we have people from all over the world joining us today, but what are some of your recommendations?
So I think getting involved with trade organizations that are specific to our industry. So in the United States, and I'm not sure how global all of these are actually, you may or may not know the answer, but American Marketing, that sounds very States-based, right? So the American Marketing Association, the Advertising Federation, the AIGA is another one for graphic artists and illustrators. So I think there are tons of different trade associations and groups that operate at both a local and a national level, and many of them have college chapters. So I think it's really important to encourage, and you have to pay the membership dues, and you have to pay for them to attend the events, and you have to make time for them to attend the events. But I think as a leader, we owe that to our people to help them advance. It's going to help their career. It's going to help our companies. So I think that's important. And then, if the company already has relationships with community organizations like nonprofits, I think it's the local Boys and Girls Club, or it's, we're passionate about animals. So, if you find, a charity organization that supports working with any different group, I think there's almost always a communications or a marketing committee. And that's a great way to just gain more outside experience, and to then develop a peer group with the other people in that marketing committee that might be from similar or even really different industries. And they might find mentors in those groups as well.
Yeah. I was also going to mention industry trade groups. So if you're in a specific industry and you have a trade group, they a lot of times will have a marketing committee or an events committee and an ambassador committee that young people can participate with. It does provide some good networking, but usually provides a lot of good education as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then you get this real deep industry specific knowledge. And sometimes there's data and tools and resources that you may not gain by any other means if you're not a member of those organizations. So that's a really good one. So if we don't have any other questions, is there any other parting advice, Lana, that you have, or outside perspective on what small businesses could be doing better? Any final thoughts?
I say just, again, the best way to go about building a team is doing the work up front to really define what those roles are going to be, and how, if you're hiring for more than one, how those roles interact. So again, start at the top with a plan and go from there.
Thank you so much. So I hope you all have enjoyed our little chat today. If you found this useful, please join us on June 19th. So Marianne Schweers is another one of our CMOs, and I'll be discussing sales and marketing alignment with her. So we're going to go deep into this discussion that Lana and I kind of touched on with B2B businesses that are very sales-driven organizations, and how sales and marketing can really align. You can also follow us on Eventbrite if you want to receive notifications for upcoming episodes, but the best way to stay in touch is to join our mailing list. So if you head to our website at robotcreative.com, you'll find the mailing list sign up, and this will notify you of upcoming episodes, but it'll also give you access to articles and tools that are not available through Eventbrite. So hopefully you've enjoyed our program today. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you back on a future episode.